Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another update for Sea of Legends. Ryan here. I have a special guest today. I mean, I always have a special guest. All my guests are special. And my guest here today, though, is Brandon O'Brien. He is a writer, game designer, a poet, and a teacher, I don't understand how you do all those things at once, but we're going to find out. So welcome, Brandon.
Hi, and to answer that question, I don't know how I find the time to do all of those things either.
Before...
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this game. Sea of Legends is really rad.
Well, heck, let's just, I guess, jump right into it. I'm just curious for you, what's like most exciting about working on Sea of Legends?
I mean, first and foremost, the thing that like kind of matters to me the most when it comes to Sea of Legends is I'm from the Caribbean. I live in Trinidad and Tobago. I've lived here all my life. This is all I know. And I'm just really eager to do some wild pirate stuff in the Caribbean, but also to like help have conversations about what the Caribbean actually looked like during the golden age of piracy, and like how that affected the locals in particular and what their feelings might be. And I'm really interested in doing some really cool, wild stuff around that in particular.
Yeah, I already love the story ideas that we're brewing up have got me really excited. And on that note though, I'm curious, like, what do you think some of the like misconceptions about the Caribbean are? You know, what do people easily miss or forget or, misunderstand?
Well, one of the things that stands out to me like very easily when it comes to a lot of pirate media, especially when it overtly says that it's set in the Caribbean, is that it treats the Caribbean as a backdrop and totally forgets that there are people there. Like, one of the standout examples to me is obviously Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right.
The very first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, Curse of the Black Pearl, is set between Jamaica and Tortuga, but we meet barely any locals. We're surrounded by British soldiers and British privateers almost the entire time. It takes us like 3 movies to meet one black woman. And that's kind of weird and strange because while it is fair to say that the Empire had the monopoly on privateering at that point in time, there were Caribbean pirates.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time you actually needed 1 or 2 of those on your ship, or else you wouldn't know how to continue navigating the islands in the first place. So I'm just really eager to put a lot of black people in your game.
Yes.
Yeah, that just matters to me a lot because the Caribbean wasn't just like a series of hollow islands full of gold and rum. They were full of people, and those people not only were affected by piracy in their space, but affected piracy in their own ways. And I want to see if I can put some of that flavor in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really it, right? Like, our focus is on character, it's on the people. So I think it would just be a huge oversight if we weren't really getting into who was really local to the Caribbean. And like you said, it's like, it goes back to Moby Dick. It's like, you got to have someone who's local, who knows these waters, who knows the flows, knows the way that you can hide, finding like the coves and caverns you can duck into when you need to, when you're doing something illicit like that. That would be essential information.
Yeah, and having more of that essential information when the Empire doesn't is so much better for you as a pirate, because it means that you know where you can hide your gold. It means you know where you can hide your ship. It means you know which ports are the safest to land and where you're not going to meet a random soldier in the same tavern as you and have to explain why you're here. Those things are vital information. And it also matters because the golden age of piracy obviously intersects with another very important time in history in the Caribbean, which was the middle and latter points of the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah.
So obviously we need to have conversations about who are on these islands, how they feel about the Empire, and what they're willing to do to bust the Empire up. Which is why a lot of Caribbean people were so eager to be pirates because it gave them their opportunity to meet um, British naval ships on the water itself and possibly just take one down.
Yeah, and liberate slaves, basically.
Yeah.
It's a big thing.
Liberate slaves, liberate islands, attempt to seek all manners of freedom, which obviously matters to pirates as well, but it matters to locals too. I really want to do some really cool, weird stuff around those things.
I think it's just so compelling, and I'm like really, there's many reasons why I guess it hasn't come out more, but I'm just like shocked that we haven't gotten more media that takes this angle, because to me what you're saying is like there's so much inherent conflict and the stakes are so high when it comes to the Age of Sail and the what people are fighting for as pirates and as locals in the Caribbean. That's just it's like a lot of history, it's terrible and fraught, but it also means it's so dramatic and fascinating, and it's just like these are stories that are waiting to be told.
Yeah. The very interesting thing about the golden age of piracy, especially in the Caribbean, is that you start the story with stakes high. You're entering a space where no one trusts you or anyone else, and you still need to parlay with your fellow pirates. You still need to make sure that there are portions of the sea that are safe to sail, or else you will be doomed at a moment's notice. And those stakes are obviously very interesting, but those stakes come from somewhere and have like actual meaning and weight behind them.
I'm curious for folks who are interested in like getting even deeper into this like time period, into this history, into these people. Do you have any like resources or go-to books or other media that you're like this was influential for me?
It's kind of hard for me to refer to a specific book, because this is just like my Trinidad and Tobago history class.
Just
so
life.
Like I can't just read all of these textbooks.
Fair points.
But one of the things that actually stood out to me a lot as we were talking and trying to build a sense of what the world was supposed to look like, especially on Twitter, not only with me but with a lot of other people who are also working on the game, because this game has a lot of brilliant writers, was the civil union relationship between pirates, which is obviously a kind of native thing that just happens in the game, that we appreciate that there is a fluid sexuality in this world that I really like and I really appreciate. And as I was digging more into like the actual history of what was considered a matelotage in the Age of Piracy, there was a book that literally stood out to me that kind of lays out a great sense of what that relationship actually looked like, and how it was actually heavily fraught but otherwise like a reality of the pirate experience. But the name of it totally escapes me now. Like I had it written down specifically so I could look for it and read this book, because I thought it was really dope.
Well, no worries. If it does pop up later, I was gonna say just like send us a little note. Maybe we can add a little pop up text, a little annotation about it. And also, I'm very curious personally, so I'd like to check it out.
Oh yeah, definitely. As we have constantly shared previously to this conversation, queerness existed in history all the time. It's the words that may have been used historically may change,
right.
The context may change, but it was always a thing. And being able to explore what it looked like in the Age of Piracy is actually kind of neat to me.
Yeah,
but I'm also really intrigued by the idea of not having it to be this hostile, fraught thing where maybe the relationship exists on unequal terms, and instead just just have people kiss. Like, just have two cute people kiss. I like that.
I mean, that was like a some of our initial very simple goals is like, let's just have cute people. Let's let them kiss whoever they want. It's that simple. And then you're like, yeah, why would we not want to do that?
Yeah. Why would anyone not want that? That's just, I mean, you get to pick which cute person you want to kiss, and you get to kiss them. It's like that. I imagine that is the reward for playing Sea of Legends for a lot of people. That's their point of entry first and foremost. I just want to kiss this cute pirate.
You know what I found is really true is that people want to kiss a cute monster. That's what they really want. Like, if I've learned anything,
yes.
It's that we're all these beautiful weirdos who like are looking for monster dating simulators, and now I'm like, wow, that should be my next project.
Yeah. If you need any help with that, I can help you with that as well.
Good. I was like, I think I know a few people who would jump in on that. So stay tuned for that after Sea of Legends, y'all. We're just gonna get even weirder. Now I'm kind of curious to sort of switch gears. Like I love exploring this aspect, but I'm kind of curious also more about you, Brandon, and your experience as well. And so like I was curious, like there's a lot of different things to ask, but I think like for the first part here, like, you know, what is it about poetry and poetry's role in your life that, you know, you bring to your writing? How's it changed the way you approach games?
It's been like a kind of backbone of my writing process. For context, I've been writing poetry since I was a teenager. I started doing performance poetry and spoken word stuff while I was still in high school. I was a member of the first Trinidad and Tobago team and the first Caribbean team to ever participate in the Brave New Voices Youth Poetry Festival in 2008. Those kinds of experiences really shaped the way that I think about poetry's role in having conversations with people and developing dialogue. So like the process of writing poetry is the process of writing anything else for me. It's in a lot of my prose, it's in a lot of my games. It helps me think a lot about how to experiment with the language that I'm using and have it do interesting things on paper or in the voice and in people's minds. But it also really informs how I think people interact with each other, because it's something about the process of writing and reading poetry really helps me think about how people speak to each other and how people process their own emotions in the moment. And it helps me a lot when it comes to thinking about the emotional weight of a particular moment. That when something happens or when someone hears something or has said something, that has its own emotional weight in that moment, and when you draw out that emotional impact, you get to make the rest of that work so much richer and more interesting by thinking about those emotional beats rather than just flowing through actions as if people are just like doing things with no real emotional drive behind them. When you think about that emotional drive, you get to pull those strings a little tighter. You get to see where characters actually stand and possibly push them to their absolute emotional limit and see what the payoff for that emotional limit is.
I hope you do. I hope you push some players to their emotional limits. I think you have like a real heartfelt approach, and your focus on what drives and motivates characters is really essential for this game, because it's so character driven. And like additionally, what I love, personally about poetry, right, is like it can be so tiny and so small and say so much, which just makes you a natural fit for our bite-sized storytelling.
And part of the reason why I'm really interested in actually like playing with poetry's real, like actual physical presence in the game is because there are a series of adventures in this game where I want players to actually transition from the point of, hey, I'm a pirate, we're doing pirate things, this is fun, to, oh wow, these things actually have stakes for like actual people, and I should actually think about how I feel about this moment. But I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time to feel about it. I have to make a decision as well. I'm really interested in playing with that and seeing how that like affects players. That transition from this was fun to this is still fun, but it also means something.
Yeah, that's kind of the fine line with this kind of interactive storytelling, is you want it to be just fun and engaging, but I find if there aren't real stakes, if people don't like really care, then they're not going to think that hard about what choice they're making. And so it's really key is like, this is, bright, colorful, lighthearted game, but like hopefully the choices we're creating are still interesting, still cause people to think, hopefully agonize every once in a while about what they're doing. And the perfect moments for me is when I see someone playing and they're like, well, this might be the correct choice, but I'm going to make the choice that I think this character really wants and really needs to make. And it's like that every time that happens, I'm like, okay, we did something right.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like the most about Sea of Legends as a game is how lovers and nemesis work. Because from a mechanical perspective, it's very easy to go into a game like Sea of Legends and say, I want to engineer this specific experience because I want to get these benefits from this card. But it's also framed as you're developing a relationship with this person. And the decisions that you make in game will affect that relationship. But those decisions could also have their own benefits or their own consequences, and you have to think about those as well. And I'm really interested in like playing with those character interactions and those the stakes between characters. So when you get to those points, the decision you're making is, I would really like to get this benefit, but I also don't want to anger this person.
Yeah.
Because I care about this person now. I want to do more things like that. And I'm really intrigued to see like how all of those things play out between my adventures and other people's adventures. And like hear people's stories about, this is what I did because I didn't want to lose this lover, or because or even because the act of being hunted by this nemesis for the rest of the game was actually really thrilling. It made me feel like I was in an actual pirate experience. I want to see people have those kinds of play experiences.
Yeah, I've definitely had that situation with one of our nemesis named Annette, because she puts a bunch of Spanish galleons on the board, and then when things get worse, she changes their objectives so they all chase you. So I've had games where like I see like 6 ships like slowly turning around the map as they're following my captain, and like that to me was like such a cool cinematic storytelling moment that didn't involve any words at all.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Being hunted by 6 Spanish galleons does not sound very, but it sounds very thrilling.
Yeah, I'm like, did I win that game? I don't remember. That's the great thing. I don't even remember if I won or lose, but I will never forget that moment. And so that's really the goal, is like, sure, you're competing, but I think to me the big takeaway is, hey, you first of all play the game however you want, focus on things you want. I think for me though, yeah, it's creating those memorable moments, even whatever win or lose, that players remember. Yeah. So now I'm curious for you, like when did you get into games? You said you started with poetry at age 10. No, you said teenage years.
Yes, teenage years. I would have started. The very funny story about one of the ways that I started writing poetry is, I started writing like for myself with nobody ever seeing what those poems were, like around 12 or 13, and then a kid in one of my high school classes saw one of those poems, and his immediate response was, "Hey, can you write a poem for me? I want to get this girl to like me." And
So the transactional relationship with art begins.
Yes, and it was a very lucrative transactional experience because that literally gave me pocket change for like half a year of high school.
Oh my
Which is,
gosh.
I'm ashamed of it now, but that was my experience, yes.
No, that's like, this is like some, this is great. No, I'm getting like some Cyrano de Bergerac vibes from this, you know.
Oh yes, oh
You're,
god.
you're the poet passing the notes to the guy trying to get all the girlfriends. There's something really great and classic about that.
It was a very funny time in my youth. I still look back on it with a mixture of fondness and shame.
And now we're just enlisting you to help other people fall in love with other characters in our game. So it's you've really been preparing for this and you didn't realize it.
Yes, I believe that. It's coming full circle.
All right, so how did games get up in the mix? Where did that come from?
So games are actually relatively new to me. I mean, obviously I've been playing a lot of board games and tabletop RPGs and stuff like that for most of my youth. But that kind of fell off somewhere around my 20s when I ran out of like good enough groups of people to play with.
Sure.
And then only a few years ago, I was given the opportunity to receive mentorship from Avery Alder in the process of attempting to make my own RPG. And when that opportunity was given to me, I was like, I don't have anything in mind, but there's this one like nugget of a thing that I've been keeping in my brain for a long time, thinking it would be really neat if somebody made this game. How about I just made this game? So I pitched that to Avery, and since then we've been constantly in conversation about trying to develop this personal RPG project of mine. And ever since I've been like genuinely involved in that process, it's been inspiring me more and more to actually do more writing and do more experimentation in that field, and it's been helping me make some other smaller RPGs and get more involved in like other bigger, potentially mainstream projects. And it's been really interesting to like flex that muscle of thinking about narrative from a mechanical standpoint, and how those two things intersect, and how writing is not just the act of making sure that people have clear rules, but making sure that those rules are evocative and tell a story and add to an atmosphere of that game. It's been really helpful to me.
What is the name of that game? So for folks who want to like check that out, if they want to see, I don't know if people always I've asked this question before. I'm like, what's like your first thing you made, and can people still find it? And do you want them to find it?
So the game, the big personal game that I'm working on right now, which is not done and not fully out of the world yet, but it's called Sound Clash.
Sound Clash.
It's a game set in a relatively just about future where in recent history a random magical event has made it so all music on Earth now has magical properties. And the very first thing that happens in the world is every music exec and agent in the universe goes, this is very interesting. How can we capitalize on this? Yeah. So the entire game is the experience of making a band, performing in Battle of the Band-like clashes, where it's not just about the actual skill of your performance, but the power of your magic. Potentially getting signed to a record deal, and then realizing that the industry is actually really terrible, and maybe how do you feel about that? And it's still in the early stages. I want to say that it's almost done, and I'm very eager to like get that into people's attention as soon as possible, but I'm still sitting on it and making sure that every single detail is in its rightful place. But I do have a lot of other smaller kind of narrative things that are very interesting. I will shout out right now, only because last night was a full moon, I feel like it's very interesting for me to just drop that there is this very small two-player narrative game that I came out with a couple of months ago called The Moon Wants Me to Leave You,
Mm.
where you just play a couple on a date that each partner in that relationship is struggling with a secret that they want to share. And one of those secrets is that they're very afraid that something in their city is becoming dangerous and hostile and maybe they should leave. And the other secret is maybe I'm turning into a monster and I want to know how you feel about that. So yeah.
That's great. Okay. Two things I'm like, yes, I want to play that. And B, I'm like, that might be very therapeutic for all these couples who are locked away at home and getting used to that.
Yes.
Could be very, very handy.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. So if people want to find The Moon Wants Me to Leave You, where can they check out your games at?
So a lot of my smaller games are on my itch storefront. That's therisingtides.itch.io. That's TITHES. I have a handful of other stuff there. I have a small collection of poetry that I put out last year. That if anybody wants to get an experience as to what my poetry looks like, they can enjoy some of those. I also have a couple of games where you actually write poems and share poems with other people, and the act of play is reading other people's work and thinking about how those poems actually affect the way that you see the world around you. That game is called The Refraction. And I actually definitely recommend, especially during these trying stay-at-home times, that this is actually a very interesting way of not only interacting with people that you haven't spoken to in quite some time, because you don't need to actually all share space to play this game. You can send your poems via email or send a recording through WhatsApp or whatever, and that's still the act of playing the game. But it also means that you get to write out some of your feelings about what it feels like to be cooped up at home and to be possibly in fear of debilitating illness and the often kinds of dangerous reactions that our governments have to those kinds of situations. You get to share those things with your friends or your family and get some kind of validation from that and know that everybody is processing their own feelings in a safe and responsible place.
Yeah, I love that it can be asynchronous. Also, just the fact that it is a game about making poems. That's what I love about narrative games is they can take all these interesting and unique forms. To your points, earlier about working with Avery and thinking really deeply about how the mechanics create the feeling and the atmosphere and evoke the play patterns, specific play patterns. I think that's just such a really good example of the range and place games can go that sometimes people, a lot of people don't even know that, that can be a game, that making poetry is a game. Most things are, most things can be play, it turns out, if we just design a few rules around them.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about that just last night because a playwright whose name escapes me wrote a play a few years ago about a girl playing Dungeons and Dragons and coming to terms with like the relationship between her and her late sister through the process of playing that game. And that playwright recently put out a new version of that game that a new version of that play that can be performed through teleconferencing apps like Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to watch what is essentially the act of playing Dungeons and Dragons the way people are playing Dungeons and Dragons now, which is on Discord or on Skype or on Zoom, and that relationship is now like heightened through the text of the work. And when I was reading about that, I was like, everything about this is really fascinating, in part because now we're highlighting the fact that not only is this the way that a lot of people play the things that we typically consider RPGs, but now you get to actually visually experience the fact that drama is very often the core part of playing a game, and that we've been interacting with that online for a long time now. And a lot of the games that I really enjoy are games where the only thing that you do is heighten the emotional stakes for other players and see what they give back to you, which is just improv. And that's very powerful and really interesting, and I want to see more people play with those things in as many mediums as possible. I want more games to challenge the idea that you need to necessarily roll dice or need a win condition in order for this to be a game. But I also want more drama and more theater and more literature to explore the fact that perhaps there is a play condition in your work. Perhaps the goal is to heighten the stakes for your reader or your audience and get to see what they will give back to you once that's happened.
So in a lot of ways, it's about just empowering people just enough to take what you're doing, what you're suggesting, sort of the structure or framework that you're building, and then find out what can they discover on their own with that.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a lot of energy in literally performing a piece that goes, here's what I think, what do you think? And then leaving and letting them deal with that. And let them actually dwell with the consequences of experiencing this work and let that be a catalyst in their life. Like, good art is supposed to do that. And I think when we think about play as a process of making decisions, we then think of play as a process of making art further.
Wow. This might be one of our deepest conversations.
Oh God.
I love it.
I'd
expect no less.
I'm glad that I could provide some layer of depth in between, like, me just wanting to kiss pirates.
Yeah, we're multifaceted human beings. You can be both. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I gotta ask, if there is one other location besides the Caribbean that you would like to see a pirate game set in, where would it be?
Asia.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Mm-hmm.
The experience of piracy in China is considered kind of asynchronous to the rest of piracy in the rest of the world. But not only was it taking place around the same time in history, but had some of the most badass pirates in history. And I'd like to be able to play a badass Chinese pirate mother with a fleet of hundreds of pirates who swear fealty to me only because they know that we actually care about each other as a family. That would be really rad. I mean, I can think of so many other places that we can also dig into, because piracy has an act, and in general the act of sailing the seas in general affected the way that we think about history overall. So it's very easy for me to draw on literally any region and say it would be really interesting to turn the way that naval travel affected this country into a piracy story. But if I were to just draw straight from the history, definitely from Asia.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's of course, naval travel was such an essential form of transportation that changed civilization, that changed economics. And in China, you get these really great characters they're people, but Xingxi, I forgive me if I said her name wrong, but that was one of the characters that inspired us in the very beginning when we were looking at who were the most powerful and greatest pirates of all time, and her name consistently is on that list. She was this basically badass old pirate matron who had a fleet, like you said, hundreds of vessels, thousands of sailors under her control, and she got to retire happy and rich and get off completely scot-free, and like that is the true pirate dream for any pirate, and she did it better than anyone else.
Yeah. It's
Well.
like one of the like inspirational stories of piracy when you think about
Inspirational.
yeah, when you think about piracy as its own like a society with its own rules. One of the things that stands out to me about Qinshi and a lot of other pirates from the Western Age of Piracy, there were rules. People had understandings about what they were supposed to do, and one of the things that stood out to me about Qingshi as an example of piracy done right is that she developed her own like moral code that her fleet was supposed to follow, and they didn't do it simply because they were afraid of her, although a lot of people did, but because they valued the rules and knew that the rules were in place so they could be effective pirates. And that was actually really neat for me, and I'd like to see like interactions like that where your relationship to your captain or your relationship to your crew is not one of fear or frustration, but one where they absolutely totally trust you, and you get to play on the fact that this is a family and everybody's doing everything that they can to keep this family afloat because they care about each other.
That is a good, I think that is a good note to leave people with here, to think about. What is your moral code as a pirate? Why does your crew follow you? You know, are they just in it for the gold, or is it something else? That will be for you to decide when you're playing Sea of Legends. Now, before we go, I know we talked about your itch page, but let's remind people again all the places that they can find you. Folks, I encourage you to go follow Brandon, check out his games. He, as you can tell, he's an insightful, thoughtful person. I think you'll get a lot out of checking out what he has to say.
I'm very flattered. Thank you. You can find me almost anywhere on the internet at The Rising Tides. That's on Twitter, that's on Facebook. My Patreon is patreon.com/The Rising Tides. I have a website, brandonobrien.space. And as previously mentioned, my itch is therisingtides.itch.io.
All right, folks. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for talking to us today. And we'll see you with the next update. Be sure to, if you randomly are seeing this and you haven't checked out the Sea of Legends Kickstarter, go check it out. If not,
It's
anyways,
rad.
Yeah, it's rad. And if not, I hope you enjoy getting to know more of our creators and our core team.